My name is Jo. I'm now 49. I was diagnosed with breast cancer when I was 47. It was my husband that felt the lump first. It was Thursday, 13th of August 2020, right in the middle of a pandemic and lockdown, and I was laid with my head on his knee watching TV. I'd put my arm up behind me and around his neck, and he went to rest his hand on my side. As he moved his hand from under my arm towards my waist, he felt a lump. I immediately sat up to feel it too, top right-hand side of my right breast, and there definitely was a discernible fatty mass there. So I called the doctor's surgery on Friday the 14th and was advised that a nurse would call me back at lunchtime. Trying to get a GP appointment is hard enough at the best of times, but during lockdown it seemed a whole lot harder. The nurse did call me back at just after 1 o'clock. After a discussion about how the lump fell and where it was decided it would be best for me to go in for a physical examination by her that same day. The practice nurse examined me and then said she was referring me to the breast screening clinic. She made the referral whilst I was there and advised that I should hear back from them within 2 working days and to expect the appointment then to be within the next 2 weeks. However, if I hadn't heard from them by the close of play on the 18th, that I should call them. It all started to feel a bit real. That weekend and the next few days went by in a bit of a blur. On the Tuesday evening, when I still hadn't heard from the breast screening clinic, I called the number that my referral letter had on it. I spoke to a lady who advised that the clinics weren't running at full capacity given the circumstances, and that it had been difficult to arrange to see me within the usual 2-week time frame. The earliest appointment had been made for me for the 7th of September. At this point, I decided to dig out my private medical insurance details that I have through my job. I called and spoke to AXA. The advisor stated that I could contact a local consultant, which they would provide me with 2 names to choose between, or maybe go to a one-stop cancer clinic appointment. They said they would provide details for me within 24 hours of this phone call. It was my intention to call the Spire on my lunch break, but then by lunchtime I'd had a missed call from a one-stop cancer clinic who stated that if I could call them back, they would arrange for that one-stop appointment at the Nuffield Hospital in Newcastle on Friday the 21st. So I chose that option and sure enough had an appointment arranged for that date. Due to COVID lockdown restrictions though, the hospital appointment, all of them as it transpired, had to be attended on my own. I first met my consultant on the afternoon of the 21st of August, where I had my first physical examination with him. On the same afternoon, I had my very first mammogram of both breasts, and then there was a bit of a wait before I then saw a radiographer to have an ultrasound and ultimately a biopsy taken. All in all, I spent just over 5 hours in hospital that day. All the staff were pleasant and made me feel at ease as best they could, but to be honest, I already had a real niggling feeling of what I was to find out. I was told to anticipate the results arriving in a week's time. On the evening of Thursday the 27th of August, I received a phone call from my consultant confirming what I had feared. I did indeed have breast cancer. I received the news on loudspeaker so that my husband could hear the information at the same time as I got it. My inner resilience kicked in and I went into pragmatist mode, asking all sorts of questions and making notes about potential scenarios. This was whilst my husband looked on in tears with a mixture of fear, admiration and disbelief. At this stage, my consultant could not be 100% certain of the type of cancer that I had. He was able to advise that the mammogram and ultrasound had shown a mass of around 40 millimetres. We then had a few more days wait before it was diagnosed that I had ER, that's estrogen receptor positive breast cancer. After the initial one-stop consultation day at the Nuffield Hospital, my consultant included me in his NHS breast clinic at the RVI in Newcastle. I've had all my subsequent treatment under that same consultant. I guess you don't realise how strong you are or as strong you can be until you have to be. And going to hospital appointments alone and hearing words that you don't really want to hear on your own really showed just how much inner strength that we can draw from ourselves. It was decided that the best course of action for my cancer treatment would be to have an operation first to remove the tumour. I was advised that the tumour would be then sent to a US laboratory, and the outcome of that would then determine whether chemotherapy and or radiotherapy would be the follow-up course of action after surgery. My consultant spoke with me at length about the surgery to take place and the associated risks. I was also advised that in approximately 10% of patients, the initial surgery is not successful. I signed my consent form. My operation date was set for Tuesday the 22nd of September 2020. Now for one of the parts of the cancer journey that I found the toughest, telling my elderly mother and my family who live over in the northwest of England. I had already told lots of my friends in the northeast where I now live, and even some of my close friends who live further away too. But I did that via text message because it was easier than saying it out loud. But I wanted to tell my mum and my family face to face. I wanted them to see that I looked okay and that I didn't appear nor feel unwell. I wanted to reassure them. So comes Tuesday the 22nd of September, and on that day at just after 7 in the morning, my husband dropped me off outside, leaving me with a kiss and a promise to return for me that evening at the RVI. On the day ward, my consultant, along with 2 students, 1 male and 1 female, came to see me around 8 a.m. I took my gown off and felt like my body was a giant flip chart, whilst my consultant drew all over my chest and breasts using a tape measure and a marker pen to demonstrate where incisions would be made, the tumour and lymph nodes would be removed, and where my nipples would be relocated. I then had a long wait without food or drink before finally heading down for theatre at around 1 p.m. A few hours later, I was in the recovery ward, almost immediately asking for a drink. On my mind all the time that to be able to get home, I had to have been able to eat something, drink something, walk on my own and pass water. Everything was progressing well. I had met all the criteria, and I was advised that I could call my husband to come for me at 8 o'clock. He messaged as soon as he was outside at 8, and I let the staff nurse know. She then came along to complete my discharge checklist. And that's when we discovered that I had a temperature over 39 degrees. Although I felt fine and told them that I constantly run hot these days, they were not allowed to discharge me without a doctor's authority. But I was really adamant about wanting to go home. Eventually, I was checked over by a doctor. I was ultimately given the green light to go home on the proviso that I would return if I felt remotely ill. I finally walked out of the door of the hospital at 22:40. We arrived home at just after 10 past 11. My husband had made a throne of pillows for me to make it easier to be comfortable. I'd been given tramadol for the pain, but mainly actually just used paracetamol. Yet I still required some constipation medication 3 days after the op. I can recommend anyone going through surgery to have constipation meds in the house, just on the one-off chance that you need them. After a week of convalescence, I then had to return to the RVI to have my dressings changed. Before surgery, I was advised of the risk one of the risks was that I may lose sensation in my nipples, yet I can confirm that when the dressings were removed that no such thing had happened. I felt every last bit of those bandages being removed and happily joked about it with the nurses. 2 weeks down the line from the operation, I then returned to see my consultant for a review on the surgery and to see how I was doing. I don't think I was mentally prepared to be in the 10% where further surgery would be required. Yet, there I was. Again, on my own with the consultant hearing that's exactly what was going to happen. Except the further surgery this time would be for a full mastectomy of the right breast. The tumour, which had been upgraded from 2 to 3, as it was 5 centimetres, had been removed, but there were still vast amounts, over 10 centimetres worth of DCIS, that's ductal carcinoma in situ. This is stage 0 pre-invasive cancer, still remaining in my right breast. It also transpired that a small amount, just 6 millimetres, had been discovered in the tissue that had been removed from my left breast in that mirroring reduction operation. Due to the size of the removed tumour and the amount of DCIS removed still in my breast, I had to go for an urgent CT scan the next morning to determine if the cancer had spread to any of my major organs. I kept that little nugget of information to myself until I'd received the results of the scan, which fortunately were that it had not spread anywhere else. I didn't want anybody else to have to worry about what was going on whilst waiting for the results. I wanted to be able to give them facts rather than having to worry about any what-ifs. I had to wait 2 weeks for the results of the CT scan. That was a long 2 weeks. Waiting for things during your treatment, whether that's the procedures or the results, is one of the most difficult things to endure. However, once the result of my scan was in, the multidisciplinary team met again and determined that I had sufficient breast tissue of my own to warrant a further attempt at conservation surgery. Before we could go ahead with any surgery, though, we needed to determine if chemotherapy would be required. I was contacted by my oncologist, who advised that my tumour had been rated on the Oncotype scale. This scale ranges from 1 to 100. The higher the number, the more likely the recurrence of the cancer. My tumour had been rated at 12. He said that it was 100% estrogen receptor positive and a relatively low score on that scale. Resultantly, chemotherapy would have little to no benefit for me. Radiotherapy, though, was required, and he scheduled me to have 10 daily sessions. He also prescribed me to take tamoxifen for a minimum of 5, if not 10 years. It was also decided that before having radiotherapy or starting on the hormone tablets, that I would have further surgery, and this was planned for Tuesday the 10th of November. Another trip to the hospital ward on my own at 7:30 in the morning. My operation time was anticipated to be afternoon time again, but I managed to get down to theatre this time around lunchtime. But the same as last time, after the op, I was keen to meet the criteria for going home, and this time I wasn't hindered by a spike in my temperature. I then had a couple of weeks wait to find out if the second surgery had been successful. The relief was palpable when he happily confirmed that there were finally clear margins. No further surgery was required, and thoughts of the possible mastectomy were dispelled. Over Christmas and New Year 2020 and into 21, I was having daily visits to the Freeman for my radiotherapy. I feel so fortunate to have such a fabulous and renowned treatment facility just 35 minutes drive away from my home. I made that journey for 9 days on my own, but was fortunately granted permission to have my husband attend with me for my final session so he could witness me ring the bell. But that's where I am up to now on my journey, almost 2 years down the line from discovering that lump. I now have a greater awareness of breast cancer and, of course, of my own breasts. I am alive. I am living the life with my husband and family, and I'm making memories. And for that, I'm grateful.